Was this a near ideal offseason for the Broncos when it comes to surrounding themselves with talent for Bo Nix, Henry?
No, it wasn't ideal. I mean, there were a lot of good things to like. I like the offseason, but I mean, ideal means perfect. And so, no. At center, you still have a big question mark.
Yep.
And, rookie quarterback, you want to have a great center there. If they found a way to keep Lloyd Cushenberry, maybe not the best investment, but it would have been a much better situation to put him into. Then the receivers. Like, you don't have a clear receiver two. Anybody who's proven to be worthy of that job, unless you think Courtland Sutton's a number 2 receiver, then you're lacking a number 1 receiver, which is even a bigger thing. And as much as you can like having Tim Patrick and Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims, Josh Reynolds, none of them, all of them have some flaws. All of them have a reason to believe they might not be ready to be a number 2 receiver. And so there are just a couple questions there.
I agree with you when it comes to the surrounding Bo Nix with talent and the best things to succeed. Probably that high-end, true number 1 receiver they weren't able to do. But realistically, we didn't think the Broncos were going to be able to do that this offseason. So I think really the one thing that sticks out to me is the tight end position. True. If Greg Dulcich is that guy that can stay healthy, boy, he's going to be an awesome safety net and toy for Bo Nix in the middle of the field. But you can't count on him 1 year. You can't count on him in his 2nd year in the NFL. Can you really count on him his 3rd year? No, not really. And so Adam Troutman is your backup there. I wish they would have done something a little more there. But, Henry, if they were going to do something more at that tight end position, they wouldn't have Bo Nix because they would have used their 12th overall pick on Brock Bowers. And then, well, would you rather have a tight end or a quarterback? You obviously take the quarterback there. So that's probably, if I'm being nitpicky, you go there. Broncos have a lot of dudes at receiver. You just hope a couple of them can step up. I love that they got Bo Nix, his receiver from Oregon, Troy Franklin. The center position, you mentioned it. They do have his center from Oregon. It is a gamble. He was a 7th-round center last year, but I'm a little more hopeful there than others. And at the running back position, did they go out and get an alpha dog like a Derrick Henry? No, they did not. But they loaded up in that room in terms of guys that could break out. Love what Audric Estime brings to the table. And also Blake Watson, undrafted guy, just like Jaleel was last year. We'll see there. The Broncos weren't going to go out and set the world on fire this offseason in terms of surrounding Bo Nix with talent. But this question comes in on the DNVR Broncos mailbag from our friend Arvada Luke, who says, although I was really skeptical of Bo Nix, I'm warming up to him, ready to be hurt again. Oh, boy. But overall, I think the Broncos did a good job maximizing their assets this offseason. Is there anything they could have done better, in your opinion? He says, my one beef, why do we always draft an inside linebacker and convert him to outside? It happens about every other year. Hank, I haven't forgotten about that beer.
That's right. So the thing about the linebackers is that a lot of college systems, the big thing is like you typically get the kind of like star defender is what it was initially called. Then every team started just like naming after their mascot or something like that, which isn't a position that actually exists in the NFL. But like that's what Micah Parsons played, and you just find a place to put Micah Parsons. And so like that was the case for Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper. Like the list is long, but that's because college defenses are just so different that they usually just have some freak athlete that they say, go get the ball. Yep. Like you put them in space and tell them go get the ball, which means that your best athletes in terms of linebackers don't really have a real system, like Drew Sanders being the perfect example of that. And you have to figure out what you want him to do and then teach him how to do it. So you can't just write all those guys off. Otherwise, all of the like 240-pound dudes who run 4.4s are just off your draft board, and you can't have that.
Yeah, and that's what's the commonality between these guys that Arvada Luke's talking about? He's talking about guys that have been drafted right around round 3. He's talking about Baron Browning, Drew Sanders, guys that they drafted at inside, moved them to outside, maybe move them back, maybe keep them outside. It's because they haven't 100% developed their craft as like a pure pass rusher. If they had in college, with the talent that they have, they would have been a first-round pick. They wouldn't be there in the 3rd round. But the Broncos said, man, we love this talent, and we think they can be that, so we're taking a chance with them. I don't mind if the Broncos do that and then immediately move them to outside linebacker and can then keep them there for the rest of their career. My issue is when you draft them, you think, well, maybe we'll keep it inside. You know what? Middle of the season, let's move to outside. Then in the offseason, you say, no, let's move back to the inside. No. I don't mind if you take a player drafted at position, move them positions, and then keep them there. It's when you bounce them around all the time. We saw it with DeMarcus Walker. That did not work out.
Yeah.
But that's kind of why. It's because there's these guys that are so athletic with so much upside that if they had realized their upside in college, they would have been a first-round pick. That's who the Broncos are drafting in the third round, and why they're moving them is because they say, man, we think this can be a first-round talent.
And the tough part with like a Drew Sanders is you just don't know where he's going to be best. So you kind of have to try him in different positions just to see what works and what doesn't. Like you need to see what happens when you have him blitz and A-gaps. You have to see what happens when you have him like play as a true edge rusher or as an outside linebacker who sets the edge. Or can you put him in the middle of the defense and have him read what's happening in front of him? And one of the things Sean says a lot is you have to have a plan, like a clear plan for whoever you draft. And, you know, I'm curious what that plan was for Drew Sanders. Like, was the plan, we just got to put him at both and see what he does best? Like, we know that he can be a good blitzer on third downs. And for a third-round pick, like, maybe not great value, but with the upside of him figuring out something that he can do in a base defense or neutral downs, like, it might be worth it. Those guys, you just kind of have to feel it out and see what they can do. And who knows? Maybe after seeing him at outside linebacker last year, they decide we want him inside and we'll just develop him, and it's going to take some time, but we can teach him how to make the reads and get to the right spot and make tackles. He seemed like he could set the edge well enough that you just leave him outside. You play him in your 3-4. You take him off the field on, you know, and like if you're rushing, have a nickel defense, but in rush packages, you let him blitz inside or maybe outside. You know, it's just figuring out what you have is sometimes a tough part with those guys.
Broncos OTAs start this week. We get to see where they've got Drew Sanders playing, and maybe Sean will tell us so we can tell you guys. Jordan Andrews chimes in on the DNVR Broncos mailbag and says, fellas, really, really, really excited hearing not just all of DNVR, but all of Denver media talking about Bo Nix. It'll be really interesting to see how far along he is in learning and actually grasping the offense come August, which leads to my question. How much contact are players allowed to have with coaches in the team? For example, is Bo allowed to have a meeting with Sean in Broncos headquarters and walk through the playbook on the whiteboard or the practice field? Or can they meet, but only off team property? Thanks, guys. Go Broncos and go DNVR. It's a fantastic question, Jordan. And so the offseason program is 9 or 10 weeks. It started at the beginning of April. For the first 6 weeks of that, the Broncos are allowed to do workouts with the players. They're allowed to do walkthrough on-field stuff. But starting this week is when OTAs start, organized team activities. That's called football practice. Now, it's not hitting, but it's 11 on 11. You're allowed to have real practices, again, outside of like massive contact. And over the next 4 weeks, the Broncos will have, over the next 3 weeks, the Broncos have 10 OTAs, and then they finish it off with the 4th week, which is mandatory minicamp. It's the only part of the offseason that is mandatory for players to show up. So Courtland Sutton's the big name that people are talking about not being there. It's voluntary right now. He doesn't have to be there. But that final week of mandatory minicamp, he has to be there. And then after mandatory minicamp, there's a 6-week break where players cannot be in the building working on football. Players can be in the building working out. Players can be in the building getting rehab, but players cannot go up and have meetings with Sean Payton. That is prohibited as much as Bo Nix probably wants to. The reason for that is, Henry, you know what NFL teams and NFL head coaches would do if it wasn't prohibited?
Work all year.
Absolutely. And then the NFL Players Association says, no, our guys need some time off before training camp starts. So that is not allowed. But over these next 4 weeks and month, Bo Nix is allowed to be grinding away in Sean Payton's offense. And there are time limitations and restrictions there. So what you should expect to happen for Bo Nix's learning process is him to just get so much information in the playbook now. Then he takes that playbook and information and works on it on his own in that 6 weeks leading up to training camp. Maybe he has a little quarterback passing camp and bring some receivers and running backs with him. But that's kind of the setup of the offseason from April. And then end of July is when training camp gets rolling. And then there are no limitations for how much the quarterback and head coach can be talking ball.
Yep. And there's kind of some gray area because you're not allowed to have meetings or film study or playbook study, but like you can talk on the phone, like you can text. Now, if the phone call is playbook study, then that's against the rules. But you'll notice that it's been like 15 years, a little less than that, since the new CBA kicked in that included all these rules. And I don't think anybody has ever been like busted or accused or anything like that. So, I mean, there's no way that no coach has been talking to a player about the playbook or anything like that. So it's technically not allowed, but because you're allowed to actually talk and chat, who knows what they could talk about.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, if someone told us, you guys can't talk about the show unless you're in the office. And the reason for that is we just don't want to overwork you guys. And Henry, if you really didn't want to be overworked, you would just like not answer my phone calls. And I'd be like, well, I can't report you to our bosses because me calling you to talk about the show is against the rules. But let's say you wanted to work on the show and you wanted to make it better and we both want to make it better. You'd answer the phone and we'd talk about it. You know what? No one would find out.
Exactly.
Because we both just want to improve it.
It's just a phone call.
So if Bo Nix and the players want to work and improve, there's going to be no violations there. It's really, this is for the players to kind of get a break away from the coaches. And like you said, you don't hear about this stuff because, but Bo Nix will not be in the office grinding 7 days a week during that 6 week period. He can be in the facility.
He can work out.
He can, yeah. He could run into Sean and say
chat
hi.
about other things.
How are you? Tell me about this play.
As soon as, I mean, you do just have to remember that the Broncos quarterbacks got busted during COVID for sitting together, and you know, cameras exist, and if the NFL wants access, they'll get access to those cameras. So just don't go up to the office and start having people ask questions.
And a couple of fun comments to round us out here. Richard D says, Todd, they need to stop sleeping on you. The blasphemy coming out of Spano's mouth, talking about how Spano can do more reps at 225 on bench press than Todd. And I got a little insight this morning.
Oh, wow.
That Spano's up in his game. So we're going to have to bring this to Todd when he's back later this week. Make sure to stay tuned to the DNVR Broncos podcast for that. And Broncos only rounds us out here and says, hey, dudes, great coverage of the connection between the University of Utah and the Denver Broncos football programs. But, Zach, you didn't mention the greatest Bronco of all time also went to Utah. You know who he's talking about, Henry?
Well,
I said his name earlier. Not on this show, but I mentioned it at some point in the past couple of hours we've been hanging out.
Oh, wow. I can't.
Brother of a star in the NFL.
Brother of a star.
He has an extremely forgettable career with the Denver Broncos. Most fans probably have never heard of him.
Oh, no.
He's talking about Lowell Lotulelei. Of course, his brother. What was his brother's first name?
Star Lotulelei.
Yeah, Star, exactly. Yeah. Star Lotulelei, who was a star for the Carolina Panthers throughout much of his career, I believe.
Yep.
Lowell, do you remember his career with the Broncos? His tenure?
I mean, I couldn't give you any details. I remember that it happened.
There was really one detail. He got signed as an undrafted rookie free agent for the Broncos out of Utah, I guess. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
He got signed with the Broncos, goes to rookie minicamp. He gets like a $20,000 signing bonus for joining the Broncos.
Okay.
He was viewed as like a really good undrafted signing. Gets a $20,000 signing bonus, signs up for rookie minicamp, is there. I don't even think he makes it through all of rookie minicamp. It says, F this, I'm done. I don't want to play football anymore. He has to give back the signing bonus of like $20K because he doesn't just want to like go through the summer and then get cut. That is the story of Lowell Lotulelei and the Broncos. Hopefully Bo Nix has a much more prosperous career with the Broncos. He's not giving back his signing bonus. He's got 18 million reasons to keep playing, and then hopefully like 300 million reasons more with that sort of big contract that he would be on deck for if he plays well. That's the DNVR Broncos mailbag. Thank you all so much for rolling with us. And drop us a question. Go to thednvr.com on this mailbag post over at thednvr.com. It has this headline on it. Drop your question in there, and we'll read it on next week's mailbag. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow on the podcast and next week on the mailbag.
We all silly like the mayor.